Now we're going to have a panel that's going to talk a little bit about how do we sustain these resources, beyond the innovation, beyond the pilot programs and the initial investments and the, initial adaptations to how the finance system works. We have heard about throughout this conference the need for sustainability and durability, not only of the work, but of the resources that help energize the work. So our next panel, led by Eddy Adra, the CEO of Coast Funds, he will lead a conversation with indigenous leaders about the projects for finance permanence. This is really going to be a case study of what's happening here and how they've been able to create long-term sustainability in assembling the resources that are needed for the work over time. So Eddy, if you'll bring your panel up.
So as introduced, my name is Eddy Adra. I'm the CEO of Coast Funds, an indigenous-led foundation in BC, a conservation trust fund that was established around the Great Bear Rainforest, and now serving also the Great Bear Sea and many other conservation initiatives on the coast. And with me today is not Merv Child. Merv Child actually was sick, and so Darcy, gratefully, as she often does, step in, and I really appreciate you joining our panel today. Darcy Dobell, who's been an advisor, an amazing advisor on the Great Bear Sea. Dahti is also with us with our Land for Future Trust, Northwestern Territories, PFP. We got Lawrence with us with the Mushkegowuk Council, Director of Lands and Resource. And with us also is Olayuk, which President of Qikiqtani Inuit Association. Just wonderful to having everyone here, everyone who's been part of that COP15 announcement that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2022 announced funding for Project Finance for Permanence initiatives in Canada, and these are being represented here wonderfully. And so really thankful for that. Before we get started on each of the projects, I think what I'll do, I'll just put my book down here, is we'll start with a quick intro to what a PFP is. I could spend probably 4 hours on that, and we could be talking about with 17 different acronyms and lose everyone and having everyone stretch again. So I won't do that, but I'll kind of fly over what a PFP is at a very, very high level. There's a lot of literature out there that can speak to that in a lot more depth. But a kind of big picture, a project finance for permanence or finance for permanence model really tries to accomplish 3 things in a very kind of efficient manner. Tries to bring forth kind of significant, ecologically significant landscape scale conservation efforts into one package, providing conditions that are required for stewarding those globally significant ecosystems for many generations. So again, that long-term aspect to the project. And what's unique here is doing all of that, bringing the capital in at the forefront of it, and doing it all into one closing or one package, bring all together. And so bringing kind of that certainty of the stewardship, of the work, and the intent of durability, kind of putting intent here in brackets. Kind of really high level as to how this process works. Here you're seeing 4 stages that leads to implementation. You're like, oh yeah, that's like 3 or 4 years worth of work. No, the viability and feasibility probably for the Great Bear Sea was maybe 20 years worth of work that was in the making, quite a significant amount of work that led to a feasibility study and then the development work that led to the final close, and I think each group will talk a bit more about that. And then you've got to implement the work. And to be able to do that, and I'm not going to go through the 37 different documents that are needed by funders for you to achieve a proper close, but a significant amount of work that goes into kind of developing what's the conservation community development plan with all of the required documentation around there. What's the financial model? What makes this sustainable, durable in the long term? How is the fund expected to be governed? And what are the very complex legal agreements that go behind it? And if you've got a really good lawyer, they'll write it in ways that are readable and understandable. Otherwise, you get confused 15 years later as to what you wrote. And then from a kind of practical approach, you really need to bring partners into the room in a very unique way. You're bringing the indigenous rights holders, communities, governments, NGOs, private donors and financiers, public donors and financiers, as well as the private sector, all together to really bring forth the initiative and support closing the deal. If anyone who's worked on relationship management, having 1 or 2 parties at the table is complex. Having 3 is difficult. Having 7 is fun. And just being, having experienced a lot more on the kind of the Great Bear Rainforest PFP, the first PFP created in the world, if I can say, it wasn't labeled as a PFP back then, but some of the lessons we've learned through this process is that project finance for permanence can deliver real direct, significant, and ongoing returns on investments. And so the Great Bear Rainforest was a $120 million investment in 2007. Over the last 15 years, nations have accessed over $100 million of funding towards over 400 projects, but have leveraged their funding through the funding they have available to bring in about close to $500 million in economy in the region. So really significant in scale. Sufficient, predictable, and durable finance is key. And so the financial modeling is really important, and the long-term aspect of this is key. The conservation is more than just about the protected area. It's about the people, the indigenous values, the economy that's being built, the community well-being, and we've really seen that leveraged time and time again. And then finally, stewardship is more than just conservation. It's investment into community, culture, language, education, health, well-being, prosperity, housing, social challenges, and the list goes on. And you really have to think holistically when you're approaching these engagements. And so I will stop there for now, and I'm going to pass it over to Darcy Dobell, who will speak to the Great Bear Sea. I don't know if you want me to control the clicker or you want the clicker. All right.
If I get confused, I'll pass it back to you. So hi everyone. As Eddy says, I am not Merv Child. If Merv were here, he would want to bring greetings from himself as the co-chair of the Coast Solutions Task Group, which is the deal team that was mandated by the 17 participating First Nations in the Great Bear Sea PFP to support and hold the development of this work for the nations. And Merv also has another co-chair, Christine Smith-Martin, who's the CEO of Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative, who also wasn't able to be here today, but I know that they would both want me to bring their regards to this group and their thanks to all of you for all the work that you do. So the Great Bear Sea PFP, as Eddy said, and like the 4 PFPs represented here, is Indigenous-led, and the Coast Solutions Task Group is charged with holding the development of the PFP, but it is the nations themselves that are the decision makers, and that they are the rights holders, they're the title holders, and it is their responsibility to make the final decisions. So the kind of organizational structure that you see here was a way for the nations to take advantage of the power of working collectively while still recognizing the ultimate decision-making authority and sovereignty of the individual nations, the 17 nations that are represented in this PFP. And just really quickly, the 17 nations come from multiple language groups, multiple cultural groups, different histories, different ecosystems, different economies, different aspirations. So each has a really distinct perspective, distinct interests, distinct priorities, and still they were joined in this effort, united by a really common vision that has its roots in work that has been going on for decades on the coast. So really quick history, and Eddy mentioned this. So what you see here is a map on the central and north coast of British Columbia. So this is the space from the north end of Vancouver Island up to the Alaska border and extending out to the continental shelf west of Haida Gwaii. This area became well known in the late 90s, early 2000s as part of the kind of international profile of the battle over the Great Bear Rainforest. And this was the map that you see here actually has is the after picture, the before picture when this region was known as the Central Coast and North Coast Timber Supply Area, was basically an industrial logging plan. And every single watershed, every single valley in this entire landscape was slated for clear-cut logging by 2020. And it was the First Nations of the region who, recognizing not only that that landscape would have been essentially obliterated, but that no benefits really would have flown to the communities. They obviously were started to fight and were joined by international conservation groups who brought this fight to a global marketplace, and were able to then convene a solutions table that included the nations, the conservation organizations, the forest companies, philanthropic foundations, and the provincial government, and managed to come to a solution that transformed the landscape, that actually reinvented how logging happens in the region, created an ecosystem-based management regime, established a network of protected areas, and built a kind of institutionalized collaborative management and ecosystem-based management. And they did that in a way based on a vision. So the Indigenous vision going into this was, as we have heard several times today, and obliterating the distinction between conservation and community well-being, between conservation and economy. And for the nations, it was, this how we live in this place means finding ways to look after ecosystems and look after people. And that vision, in the time since then, has created over 1,200 new jobs, has created over 125 successful businesses, has raised household incomes, has delivered all kinds of positive outcomes for households and communities and people in the region, while advancing conservation. And this is a vision, and this track record is what has since become known as the Project Finance for Permanence model. It was financed by investments from the federal and provincial governments and philanthropic foundations, paired with an ongoing revenue stream that the nations developed with carbon credit revenues. And that model itself has now inspired similar adaptations around the world. What the nations knew, coming back to this, is that their work wasn't done. They're coastal peoples. They wanted to take that same vision into the sea. And so what you see with the Great Bear Sea map is what that model looks like, extended into the marine environment. There's a network of existing and new protected areas, which is the heart of the conservation model. Those are nested in collaborative governance agreements and in a bioregional ocean management framework agreement. There are layers and layers of planning. If anyone wants to find, I'm happy to talk more about how that work was done. I do want to note that the nations going into this, their foundation was community-led marine use plans, where the nations themselves identified their own values, the places that were important, the harvesting sites, the sacred sites, the models that they wanted to use for the management of their marine territories. And that over years of planning and with layers of inputs from other nations, from governments, from stakeholders, at the end of the day, what came out of that was a conservation plan that aligns with a 30 by 30 target. The nations didn't start with a target. In fact, they explicitly said that at the time when this work began, it wasn't 30%, it was 10%. But the nation said, we're not abiding by somebody else's target. We're doing our own planning work. And at the end of the day, when you do all that work, what comes out the end of the pipe, in this case at least, was pretty much 30 by 30. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the finance model here, and it's something that I'm happy to do at length at any time. But for the moment, I just want to note, like the Great Bear Rainforest model, the financing here is a combination of public investment, so from the federal and provincial governments, philanthropic investment from a whole range of foundations, both within Canada and around the world, and also the expectation of additional revenue sources. So the finance model, in this case, when the Great Bear Rainforest agreements were done, that finance model was kind of a guess. And it was sort of like, what do we think we can raise? What do we think we can gather in the way of investment? In this case, 15, 20 years later, the nations now have a very clear idea of what stewardship costs. Every one of the nations that are part of that Great Bear Rainforest work and the work on the marine side have stewardship programs, they have guardian programs, they can ground truth the cost estimates of what it takes to do this work at a community level and extrapolate what that's going to look like over years. So this finance model was much more, it was developed with a lot more input than the original one. And the numbers are significant. When you say 17 nations times 20 years for stewardship work, it is a substantial investment. And there is, and the upfront capital can be leveraged, we know that, but there is still this gap, these additional revenue streams. We know that there's going to be a need for ongoing revenue. And this is the nut that conservation finance needs to crack everywhere. And when we talk about it, we've heard more about it today, we're going to continue to talk about it. At the end of the day, we know that this work is the gap that we have between what it takes to do this work well and where the revenues are now is a really critical problem. And I think from our perspective, the work that is represented here, it's conservation work, yes. It's also economic development, it's infrastructure development, it's workforce development, it's the preservation and growth and protection and nurturing of natural capital that benefits everyone. And we need to see that reflected in our economic models much more than we have. And it's great to, there's more conversation, but there's still a lot more work to do on this front. I just want to wrap with a quick sense of what we mean by some of those benefits. And as Eddy said, that blending of conservation outcomes with human well-being. Because we do see from the track record that we have from the Great Bear Rainforest, we can anticipate 3,000 new jobs, that really great investment in youth. We know that these are the programs that keep youth inspired to stay in school and pursue careers in science, in conservation and business. And so we've seen that kind of jobs and prosperity outcomes. We know the hectares, we know what this is going to look like in terms of protecting ecosystems. And I think the real power of this, and what we keep coming back to, is that investment in Indigenous leadership. I mean, we know these are the models that we need. These are the models of the future. This is what conservation needs to look like in that really integrated way of erasing the difference between conservation and human well-being, that this is where we need to go. So I'm going to stop there and pass it on to Dahti.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dahti Tsetso Suje. Si Klicho Daneonte got Lidlique got ensemble got out Dutzane Sedze Tasin Nahe Guinde. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dahti Tsetso. I am Klicho Dene. I'm blessed to have two places I call home in the Northwest Territories, Fort Simpson and Yellowknife. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Misty Ireland, who traveled with me to the symposium. She's one of the Indigenous government-appointed directors to our newly established trust. Before I get into some more of the details around the NWT PFP initiative, or what we now call the NWT, our Land for the Future initiative, I just want to take a moment to sort of reflect on what gives me the most hope around these models. And I've heard various different speakers over the last couple of days touch on these different themes. In particular, the Indigenous speakers who came before our discussion panel. And when I started working to convene the discussions around the NWT PFP initiative, part of sort of the education that I walked into the discussion with was from elders and community members in my own home community. And what's exciting to me about this particular initiative is that it's accumulation of work over decades. But even beyond that, you know, since in our community, we always say that we've been on our land since time immemorial. And Misty's mother, actually, I worked with her quite closely in some of my previous roles. And she was part of some discussions where we tried to explore what it meant to have leadership in a Dene way. What does it mean to take leadership in the Dene way in conservation? What does that mean? And what's exciting about this NWT, Our Land for the Future initiative, is that it's going to resource our communities to take leadership in a meaningful way, to catalyze a bunch of incredible change that builds off of very intrinsic values within our communities. And, you know, Darcy, you mentioned, you know, on the BC coast, the 30 by 30 mandate is not something our communities talk about. It's not something that drives the decision-making framework of my leaders or my elders. Never even heard of 30 by 30, most of them. But what 30 by 30 has done is it's opened up a whole conversation around protected areas that started to align with the ways in which our communities approach our relationship to land, because one of our common sayings is we are a part of the land is a part of us. And if you think about that, like even scientifically, you are actually literally a part of the land. Our body is made up of, you know, a huge percent of water, and we drink our water and it's literally part of our bodies. Like, we are literally a part of the land, and the land is literally a part of us. But in Indigenous culture and in Dene culture, we honor that connection in our entire way of thinking. And we've, in the North, often looked to inspiration from the coast. I know I did in my work in the past. And what I didn't know in looking to the coast is that they had this incredible financing model behind a lot of the incredible stewardship work they were doing. And so it's exciting for me to be at a point in supporting our Indigenous governments to explore this initiative, because it helps me think through into the future what it might look like. Steve Nita has been on a number of discussion panels. Steve has been a major conservation leader in his community in the North and across the North with Aidanenene and his work there. When we were exploring the feasibility work, that feasibility stage for a PFP initiative in the NWT, we looked at examples like Taidanenene and Adeji and Teyata as Indigenous-led models, and to foresee what it would look like in the North. So maybe I'll just kind of get in a little bit to what this detail is. It's sometimes I have to orient even the room about the North a little bit, because where I'm from, Indigenous governments are empowered in a way that is very different than most parts of the world, and even within Canada. In the NWT, Indigenous governments are truly like a third level of government, and so they're included in the very framework in which decisions are made, even over resource extraction industries around the whole gambit. And so when we started exploring this initiative, we really went to Indigenous governments to ask them, what is it that you would what is it that you would want to see supported, and who would like to explore this initiative with us? In the end, we ended up with an agreement that had signatures by 22 Indigenous governments, the government of the Northwest Territories, the government of Canada, and then our private partners. And this is a level of collaboration up and down the Mackenzie Valley that brought a lot of pride and hope to our leadership, because it's difficult to find initiatives and work that we can agree on. And it's not common, even as empowered Indigenous government, it's not common for that level of partnership to emerge, that level of consensus. And it was because we were exploring this initiative from the perspective of Indigenous governments and how to support Indigenous leadership, but also because it's building on the vision and ambitions of Indigenous governments. So over the last number of decades, our communities have been exploring land use planning, they've been exploring their protected areas interest, and they do it from the perspective of land, language, culture. taking care of the land so that we can take care of ourselves. And hectares is just an after product of that dialogue. When we think through the land in which we use to harvest animals, to harvest plants, where our places of cultural and spiritual significance are, and our communities then work to try and take care of those landscapes, hectares are just a natural product, but they're not the driving motivating factor for our communities. That is what makes this model so transformative. And I think on the last panel you talked about returns on investment. We've explored that in the North around Indigenous-led conservation. And in a similar manner, but like totally different, we've done research where we've seen that for every dollar that we're investing into this work, and I know there's been similar work done in the coast, how that has a transformative impact and ripples across our communities in so many incredible ways. Because when we have our own people out on the land doing monitoring, strengthening our language, working with youth, stepping into leadership, being elevated as knowledge holders, being honored and respected for the knowledge that they have, it does incredible things. And I've seen it, I've witnessed it firsthand, where I see members of our community, it becomes an addiction strategy, it becomes a suicide strategy, it becomes a motivator for young people to want to graduate high school. It has such an incredible impact within our communities that it then decreases domestic violence rates. It increases, high school graduation rates. It has this incredibly transformative impact, but that it also enables our partners and society around us to then tap into the knowledge that is deeply rooted within our communities. Because you can't make good decisions unless you have good information. And that's effectively what our communities can offer up, is they can offer up a system of knowledge that is not otherwise being accessed, that can help us make better decisions around how to manage our resources, how to manage our environment, but that also does it in a way that supports reconciliation, and then ultimately, leads to things like 30 by 30, but that's not ever where we started. And in the North and across the world, really, Indigenous peoples have the highest ambition when it comes to protected areas. I think yesterday somebody talked about the 30 by 30 mandate as not being just about like 30% of the world, but also about connectivity. And I thought, it's so interesting because, again, none of our communities approach our protected areas work through the lens of connectivity, but again, it becomes a byproduct, because when we start to take care of our landscapes from the perspective of where we harvest, where we have sites of spiritual significance, where we're trying to take care of the land so that we can take care of ourselves, hectares, connectivity, all of that just become the natural byproducts. So by investing in the leadership of Indigenous peoples, we tap into this incredible model that is transformative for our communities, but also just transformative for the world writ large. So the outcome of our discussions is very huge. This map is very imperfect. I encourage you not to really pay too much attention to the map. I mostly wanted to try and give you a reference for where we are situated in the world, because the NWT PFP initiative will apply to 5 out of the 6 regions in the NWT. Unfortunately, we don't have accurate mapping right now around the protected areas ambitions of our Indigenous partners. What's really interesting is that the numbers that I'm sharing on the screen, and I didn't realize how many Americans are in the room, so I'll translate that into hectares for you. It's 37.9 million existing and new hectares, and incentivizing immediately 23.3 million new protected areas through this work. It's big landscapes. I come from a place that's very large, it's very remote, and I reflect often how grateful I am to be from this landscape and to be a Dene person, because there's not very many of us in the world. And so I feel like I won like a birth lottery a little bit. But at the end of the day, these are initiatives, or at least in the NWT context, they're finance mechanisms, they're financial models. Ultimately, it's the Indigenous governments through their leadership that hold the jurisdiction, that hold the rights, that will actually bring all of this to life. What the PFP initiative does is it holds resources in a fund that in the NWD context will be distributed over the course of 10 years. It doesn't actually create any of these areas. It holds the resourcing to support the outcomes of those initiatives over time. So that way, as our Indigenous government partners work through they're jurisdictionally based discussions, that there's resourcing there to support their outcomes. And that changes the whole parameter for these discussions in a really meaningful way, because Steve Nita can tell you about it. I know I was involved with the Adeji establishment agreement in the DHO. Those initiatives took 20 plus years. And the constant discussion around these is what's the trade-off between resource extraction versus protected area initiative work. And I really dislike that dichotomy, like in our own communities, because we elevate the land and our stewardship responsibility to the land doesn't mean that our leaders also don't want to pursue resource initiatives. And in many ways, these are two sides of the same coin. And by strengthening our conservation ambitions and our protected area ambitions, we also strengthen our ability to engage in other markets as well. Because effectively what happens is like a very big, large-scale land use planning discussion in many ways. What I'm most excited about is the impact I know it's going to have on our people, the amount of guardian programming, the amount of young people who'll be able to step into these roles and be mentored by leaders in our communities and by knowledge holders in our communities. It's going to do simple things, like more women will learn how to tan moose hides, more kids will have opportunities to speak the language on the land with their elders. But those things have a huge impact within our communities. And so what I like to think about often is, in 10 years' time, what will my home look like with these types of scale of investments happening in our backyard? And that picture, that image for the future always gives me immense sense of hope. So, Masi.
Unisakut, Nunavumito Junga, Olayuk Akesuk Junga, Takunua Qikiqtani Inuit Association, Junga, Takunua Quatimayu Simalak Junga Akaguno 16. Good afternoon. My name is Olayuk Akesuk. I'm the president of the Qikiqtani Inuit Association, which is the 13 communities in our region of Nunavut out of the 25 that we have. It's our 50th year as an organization for our Inuit to represent our people in our land claims agreement or that we signed in 1993. So we've been very busy for the last 50 years. So 50 years ago, we started with one staff member with 16 board members. And today we have 170 plus staff members. We're very proud of where we are. And I would like to also introduce our staff, senior staff, for negotiations of anything that we'll be talking about on behalf of Qikiqtani Inuit Richie Payton, that has done a great job with the philanthropic organizations that has helped us a lot with this PFP and also the Government of Canada. Again, like I said, we have a very large region that we represent under our land claims agreement. Like I said, we have 13 communities. The furthest community we have is Grease Fjord up there, way up there with 120 people of population. The furthest down is we can't even see the islands, which is Sanikiloaq in the southern part of the Hudson Bay. So we represent a big, huge portion of Nunavut territory. And we've been, we're very new with this kind of activity that we're working with our people in order for us to make sure that our people understand what we're trying to do with the conservation areas that we're proposing with the federal government. Is that we had to do 3 community trips to educate, to tell them this is what we're trying to do. We didn't want to start without any support from the people who we represent. So we end up, excuse me, we end up going for those 13 communities 3 times, just for them to understand what we're trying to do on behalf of our people. Because conservation is something very new for us. we've been living up there for thousands of years, like our ancestors and people that has done a great job to ensure that we have our territory in, it was not a territory, there was no boundaries back then. So our job is that now we have boundaries that we have to represent our people in that area. Again, something that we're very also proud of is that there's only 16,000 of us out of this huge region that we represent out of the 13. In the whole territory of Nunavut, there is 25,000 people in our territory. So we represent 52% of our territory's landmass and oceans that we represent. And we're very proud where we are and what we're trying to do for us, as our new generation will understand what the purpose of the conservation is in the future, so that they can have future what our ancestors lived through on that. So that territory that we have is bigger than the British Columbia. It's something we're very proud of as a very small population of Inuit in Canada. And our population is very young. It's a very young population of Inuit. We represent, it's about 90% Inuit and 10% outside of our territory that lives in our territory. Again, what we're proposing for the future is to have a conservation area that will have 987,000 square kilometers, which is probably 100 million hectares in Canadian. So it's like 11% of the 30-30 that Canada is looking at in the future. So that's what we're proposing to the government, and hopefully we'll go through with that proposal, as we've been working on it for the last 2.5 years. With the agreement that we signed with the philanthropic organizations from Canada and throughout outside Canada, that has done a great job supporting us with this PFP, as when the Prime Minister Trudeau announced in December 2022 that there will be $800 million for the 4 Aboriginal PFPs that were mentioned. So we're still working on that. We're that close to signing, but then again, the election came, so I don't know where we are with that. Hopefully, we're still like that close before we have any agreement with the federal government. I know some of the donors are here too that has supported us a lot, and that we're very proud of to do this job. We have our staff that has done a great job to ensure that the negotiations go through. The negotiations are very important, and the board is very important for me as the president of the QIA, which is Qikiqtani means island. Baffin Island Inuit Association would be something like that. Back then it would be, Paul Crowley would say, Baffin Regional Inuit Association. When he worked, it started in 1975, so we'll be celebrating our 50th with our board this year, next month. So this is Sina. We call that Sina. The flowage is what we call this Sina, which is very beautiful. It's very beautiful where we are. May is the best time of the year. It's probably like that in Panelists right now. I'm pretty sure this is near Panelists. And as you go down, further down south, the climate changes. So it's something that we're very proud of, that, it's something that we want to teach the Canadians and other people around the world where we are. During Impact 5 here in Vancouver, I had a meeting with over 160 Aboriginal groups around the world. I learned a lot where we are, where the colonization really impact our people. Again, I think it's us to ensure that we have conservation areas that will be there. That should be run by Inuit or Aboriginal groups that lives in that area. I think that's the most important thing is that we, as Aboriginal people, run our conservation. In the past, it used to be, the government running all the conservations, all the parks, all the national parks or other things that are related to the government. I think it's time for us to start running our own conservations in the future. Again, I want to say that the IIBAs or the IBAs, Impact Benefits Agreement in the past for national parks or other territorial parks that are there in place, they last 7 years. 7 years is not a long time. Then we have to renegotiate that again. To do this kind of things, it's important for us to include the conservations that are coming in to be part of the negotiations of the past impact benefit agreements between Canada and Inuit. So that's where we are, and we're very proud of what we're trying to do. It's very hard work. We have big other files that are in place in Qikiqtani Inuit, but this is the important one that we want to ensure that it's completed in the next few years, even next few months. Inuit stewardship is very important for us. We have Nautsitoktit, which we call Nautsitoktit is guardians of the community. And these guys are very important for us. They're under our previous agreement on Talokoti Imangat, which is Lancaster Sound Agreement, IMAC, we call with the federal government. And we started with the 5 communities. So for those 5 communities, when we started, as you could see, the land, we start from is up near North Pole, all the way down to Senekilok, which is Hudson Bay. We started with Arctic Bay, Pawnee Lid, Clyde River, Resolute Bay, and Grace Fjord. And we ensure that we have Nautsitoktit. Nautsitoktit are very important for this project as they are creating employment for our people. These Nautsitoktit that we hire learn to use technology to ensure that we are doing our reports properly. And they are also the help of the community. The food security is very important for us. And we live in a very high cost of living in those communities, and they hunt for the communities. What they catch, if they catch any animal, they'll take the samples to ensure the animals are healthy. Is there anything that is wrong with the animals they caught, whether it's polar bear, walrus, seal, fish? They have to ensure that they get samples to make sure the animals around their area is healthy, and we learn more as we go. These are very important for us, and we want to do this to every 13 communities in the future. We're up to probably 9 communities now, so we still got to work for other communities to ensure to have these. So we're very proud of that. Like I said, it's a huge area that we're trying to propose to the federal government, which is 987,000 square kilometers, well, 100 million hectares, I guess, in United States number. Again, it's we're very proud of that, and we'll continue to do our very best to ensure that we do the right thing for our people, for the country, and to say that any Aboriginal groups around the world can certainly be the ones running the conservations in the future. Thank you very much.
Miigwech, I'm Lawrence Martin. I come from Moose Factory, Ontario. This is where we manufacture moose. So put your orders in today, and I'll get you one by this fall. I'm also here to recruit all of you because we need help in Ontario with our PFP. And let me explain that as I tell my story. I want to show you a video, but before I do that, I want to explain a little bit about what Mushkegowuk and Wahkotuwan means. Mushkegowuk are our people. That's who we call ourselves to be, because where we live. And Wahkotuwan means kinship, our interrelationship with each other as humans, our relationship with the land, with all of life around us. When we started a few years ago, we went to the elders, explained what we're trying to do, and we asked for a name of the project. And as one elder said, Wahkotuwan. You have to have this whole redevelopment of relationships, because the relationships that we need are ones that have been broken, especially with Canada, Ontario, various governments, and the industry, and everybody, even amongst ourselves as First Nations. We've forgotten our connection that we have with each other and our connection to the land. So Wahkotuwan is the name of it. I want to show you a video next. And this one guy from Pewanak, he calls our area like the Serengeti. And I hope this video works. You see, it's dark. And maybe I'll press it again. There we go.
It's like the Serengeti of Ontario, maybe Canada. The peatlands, all the river systems, all the creeks, all the bogs, it's all connected with the bay. It's like a giant lung, just like your lungs. It gives you life. It's really important not only for our community, but the whole planet.
This is what they talk about it as, being the breathing land. To us, it's part of that living and breathing part of the earth.
It's a breathing of your lungs. That's how our elders describe the wetlands.
The other part to this land here is we call it the shoreline, the birthing place, because of the birds. Those two are very much connected and need to be protected together, not just one.
You may applaud. Thank you very much. And what are we talking about? You know, this area that we live in is the conservation of homelands of the Mushkegowuk people. And it was visited by the settlers in the 1600s through the Hudson Bay Company. Back then, the Rupert's Land. You know, when you go through that whole history, it's where they came with their fiddles, their drums, and their Bibles, and some cookies. But to us, that whole relationship has been important to maintain and yet hold on to our language and our culture. Because within our territory, we sit on this huge carbon sink. It's the second largest carbon sink in the world. It's the largest for sure in North America. So that's really important for us to know that. And the diversity of this area, terrestrial diversity, it's huge. There's so much there that's really important for the whole integrity of the ecosystem. As a matter of fact, our scientists have come up and counted the mosquitoes. Guess how many mosquitoes we have? Yeah, a lot. It's estimated at 297 trillion mosquitoes. And there's even more black flies. Over 300 trillion black flies. So come and visit. We also counted the polar bears this past year. In James Bay alone, there's about 1,400 polar bears that roam. And then there's more in Hudson Bay, twice as much in that. We have over 10,000 belugas that roam in the James Bay. And we have these walruses that are also in the area. We have kelp forests that are there. So it's a beautiful area. So you could see all these miles and miles and kilometers of sand when you ride along the shores of James Bay. Our area that we're trying to protect is about 1,200 kilometers long along the shorelines of James Bay and Hudson Bay, between Quebec and Manitoba. And as you ride along on your four-wheeler, just be careful. The polar bear might jump out at you and say, hello, snack. Right? So for us to have this PFP means that we have to have allies. Because we live in this area also where critical minerals are now being discovered. And we've been working with Ontario to try and be partners so that we can actually mitigate any kind of impacts that this kind of mining would have in the area. But there's been no discussions with Ontario at this point, to the point where it has cost us money. We lost at least $100 million from the feds on this PFP project. We're now only allotted $100 million to work with as we move forward. And the reason was because Ontario was not at the table. So that's why you're all hired to help me, okay? And the other thing I wanted to show you is this animation of what's going on in the territory as far as critical minerals and the mining claims that are happening. Click again. Oh, that's Paul. That's Paul Crowley. He's been our advisor. Paul, stand up, Paul. Don't go under the table. Stand up, stand up. But obviously his advice is not working. Unless somebody has some kind of magical technological touch. It's working. Is it? Oh, yeah. That's okay. It's not working on this screen here. Sorry about that. But it just shows the mining claims that are happening since 2002 to now. In that one area where all this carbon is situated, we have over 37,000 mining claims. How big of an area is that, you say? And to us, it's an area about 12 times the size of Toronto. 12 times the size of Toronto. So and it's growing every day. So this is what we're trying to deal with to make sure that that carbon sink is kept intact. That's a lot of carbon. We have estimated over 35 billion tons of carbon in that area. So it's really important, that we make sure that it stays intact. Because as in the video before, you saw us saying it's the breathing lands. The elders call it the breathing lands because it's the lungs of the earth. And if you start tampering with the lungs in your body, you know what's going to happen to you. So this is what we are afraid of that may happen to us, not just our Cree people that live there, but to all of the people in the world on Earth. Because these carbon sinks, that's what they do in our interpretation as Indigenous people. This is our relationship with it, and this is how we understand it to be. So that's really important. And as you can see, the rest of the map doesn't really show too much of other activity, but everything is coming at us now. And to the south of us, in the southern part of our territory, this map shows what all the activities that have been taking place over so many years. There's no free piece of land that you can go and camp because it's all crown, it's all mining, it's all forestry, it's all hydro dams, it's all kinds of projects, roads and transmission lines, municipalities. So we don't want the north to look like this. So that's why we're working hard to try and establish good working relationships with these guys. These are our friends. They're the ones that are operating those machinery, like the ones, you know the movie you guys saw, The Avatar? Yeah. So they're coming into the territory and they're changing laws. The environmental laws will be wiped out soon. The Endangered Species Act will be altered, amended big time to allow for fast tracking of all mining and all kinds of economic development to happen. So this is what we're afraid of. Even our friends in the Liberal government in Ottawa, they say these good things, but sometimes, those good things don't come true. And this is what our people are afraid of. It's the lack of trust that's been there for hundreds of years. So when we bring in this PFP, this conservation project to our area, there's a couple of our communities that don't want to sign up because they don't trust the government. And we keep working with them regardless because we have to do it together. Let me show you this next video. Is that working too?
My name is Garfield Mark. This berry should be kept so that it won't be damaged, so it won't be drained, and that way we'll save the world, not just ourselves, but the world. And that's right now we're as First Nation, we're only concentrating on the small areas of our own interest, but we should be concentrating on the whole area.
Our elders support what we are doing, our community members, and they keep asking for progress. What's going on? What's going on? And so we have incorporated different activities within our planning. I have booklets up here. I have a few in the house you guys can have, you can share. And our conservation plan and so on. So I have a lot of material over there that Paul Crawley is going to be selling, plus T-shirts. And that artwork that you see, we incorporated the artists in the area to help us with the messaging. Because to us, the artists are the ones that are spiritually connected to the land, to the animals, to life. They're the ones that are inspired how to relay those messages to us. So we have them as part of this group. You mentioned the food security, because we rely on all of these birds that come here. We rely on all those caribous, the moose, the fish. So food security is part of what we're doing. And because it's such a beautiful area too, we incorporated tourism as part of the plan so we can bring people to come and enjoy it. So that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it. So I thank you very much. And Eddie, I'll give you back to the moderator.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting hearing from the four of you, and I think the consistent theme was it's not about 30 by 30. It's not about kind of conservation goals that have been established elsewhere. It's about community. It's about, and one of the things I was reflecting on, I had to write it down so I don't forget it. I took it back as it's about self-determined, sustainable finance with Indigenous peoples who will have the foresight to take care of the land, which will take care of all of us at the same time. So it's not just about those communities. I think the work that each and every one of you is doing is about all of us in this room. And so we've heard, I think, some messages of, what else is needed. PFP is a great finance model, but it's just a financing mechanism. It's not the entirety of the entire conservation plan. And so it's how do we leverage that mechanism to support the work that's there. And so I see the clock ticking down to 35 seconds. So maybe in like one or two lines, if you want to kind of close your thoughts. And I know, Martin, you had some really thoughtful messages, and anyone who has got any kind of closing thoughts or closing messages you want to add, please do so.
Okay, I'll start. A short one. When we signed the memorandum of understanding with the philanthropic organization and the federal government, my message was that if you donate money, it doesn't mean that you're buying our land. It's something that I'm very proud of to say is that we are the ones that will run the conservation in the future. Again, that's the way I see it. In the past, it used to be that the other way around. If you put money in there, you run it. But when we started the negotiation, I said right away that if you're going to be donating money to our organization, it doesn't mean you'll be running the conservation. It means we'll be working together to ensure the conservation goes ahead the way we see it, the way you see it. So works both ways. It doesn't work one way, it has to work both ways. And that's the message that I really wanted to say for my closing. Again, as Inuit of Canada, we're the largest landowners of Canada. Under our agreement, maybe even throughout the world, I believe that we're one of the largest landowners, and we're very proud of that. But it's our land. It's been our land for thousands of years. Now we have to negotiate to take some of it. But it's our job to ensure that the conservation and the land is safe for our people, for our great-grandson, great-grandkids, and so on. So that's the way I see it. Again, we've also collected all the Inuit knowledge as much as possible to our organization to ensure that when we're negotiating, we use those words during our negotiations with any people that are interested in our region that we represent.
One word, help. Let's all help each other, because this is one planet that we all live in. It's not just up to us to try and save the world for all you guys. We all have to work together.
I wanted to share a little story. My children, I joke to folks around our table that this PF initiative became like my fourth child. I'm a mother of three, but we invested so much time and so much energy into this work. It became like my fourth child. But my children have been a constant source of inspiration and motivation for me in this work. And last summer, the last 2 summers in the north, we've had unprecedented wildfire, very dramatic wildfire seasons, and it is not reassuring to look into the future and see the ramping up of those climate changes. And that's just one element of the climate we're experiencing. We're experiencing flood, there was the global pandemic. We're really feeling the effects of climate change where I am from. And I remember my youngest, he was only like 3, maybe 4 at the time, and he was reflecting about how if we don't do our job, if we don't take care of the animals and the plants and each other, that we were gonna lose all of the colors of the world. And he's just this little child, and I thought, like, what do you mean? Like, what? And then a couple days later, I went out on the river, our beloved Decho River, with my husband and our kids, and we were trying to get to our cabin about 40 kilometers downriver, and the winds shifted as we were traveling, and we were just engulfed in smoke. Couldn't see like 2 kilometers ahead of you or behind you or on either end because it was so thick. And this has become a normative part of our realities in the summer, the smoke. And I looked around and all of the colors were gone. Everything was gray. And his little wisdom was it really struck me. I remember feeling really emotional. I get emotional even thinking about that moment with him. But I think that that is what gives me hope, listening to the stories from other regions and the work of our Indigenous, our communities, is because if we work together in partnership and we start to invert our ways in which we're approaching the problem, because how it's been approached so far hasn't worked. It has not worked. And I think what we're saying is our communities hold a path forward, a way of working into the future that provides a lot of hope. And I've worked in conservation work for a long time now. I did studies in university. And it was always like, how could we fit Indigenous knowledge into like a Western framework? Like, how could we incorporate traditional knowledge into our research? And what I really want to see is an inversion of that dynamic where Indigenous peoples and knowledge systems are really leading the work, and in partnership, the incredible expertise and knowledge that is given through Western science is instead complementing those frameworks of system knowledge development. So these initiatives are one example of that leading into the future, and I look forward to more of this and more conversations like this with people like you. So, Masi.
I just want to close off by acknowledging how great it is to be able to do this work with these people, with these partners in rooms across the region and across the country and around the world. I think it's such a blessing that we have the leadership and have the opportunity to invest in the leadership of those who will continue to steer the vessel as the smoke clouds billow, as the government winds change, as the threats come, and keep that vision, the sights high, the vision distant, the vision kind of long term, and inspire all of us to be better at the work that we do. So thank you to all of the folks who lead this work and to everyone who's a part of it.
Thank you, everyone.